It was a bitterly cold Monday morning in January. The small crew arrived at a nearly completed house, there for inspections and minor touch-ups. They began in the basement, checked the AC, the furnace, the plumbing, and the electric. On their first floor, they marked a few places where paint needed touched up. On the second floor was a small room measuring about 6 by 10. No windows, one door, almost a walk-in closet with no shelves. When the workers opened the door, what they saw frightened them. On the ground lay a woman, naked from the waist down. Her hands, ankles, neck were bound with crudely fashioned strips of blue jean material. Beneath her body, a pool of blood. And on the walls, splatter and smear marks of blood. She'd been stabbed over 20 times. The police began their investigation looking for suspects related to the victim. They produced none. Then they asked the question, who had access to a home that they knew was heated in the winter, but yet unoccupied? So they compiled a list of all the workers who'd ever worked in the house. They began talking to each one. At the end of their investigation, they found that all but one could be accounted for. As is often the case, absence makes suspicion grow. They did, however, meet his wife, David's wife, and she informed the police that David had been missing for a couple of days. And she was particularly upset because he had her car, which he needed to get to work. She thought maybe he had gone to see his brother in West Virginia. The police put out an APB for her car, and sure enough, they got a hit. They immediately drove down to West Virginia, secured the car in its storage yard, obtained a search warrant. Whereas the house had been an almost pristine crime scene with freshly painted walls and carpeting that was new, unlived in, the car was a mess. McDonald's wrappers, clothing, miscellaneous tools. But in their search, they were able to find 2 strips of blue jean material, one of which had blood on it. A thorough forensic examination also revealed 4 drops of blood in the back. They put out an arrest warrant for David. He was found several days later, taken into custody, and when questioned, surprisingly enough, he asked for a lawyer. In fact, he asked for a lawyer 7 times, but the detectives kept grilling him. No confessions, no major statements were made, and he was charged with murder. I was appointed the case. It was my second murder case. I was hopefully optimistic because, well, the case was circumstantial. They had strips of blue jean material in the car, but they couldn't put David in the room. Well, then the DNA results started to come in, and the first set of DNA results involved the forensic search of the trunk area. And what they found was not 1, not 2, not 3, but 4 distinct DNA profiles, none of which belonged to the woman in the house. Rather, 2 of them belonged to women who had been found brutally stabbed and abandoned in new buildings or alongside the road. The other 2 missing and presumed dead of a homicide. My hopefully optimistic murder case had now become 3 separate capital murder cases, and I wasn't quite as hopefully optimistic. My hope really began to diminish on the day that the prosecutor called. It was an afternoon, and you know how sometimes they just have to call you? And they have to call you. They could send you it in an email, or back then, a fax, but he called me with such glee in his voice because he wanted to let me know that he was holding a report. It was a DNA report. It was a DNA report that he said changed everything. And he'd be sure to send it right over to me. You see, they had David's DNA from inside the room. As I walked to the fax machine and I stood there waiting as it slowly printed out the paper, I picked it up and I thought to myself, you know, the prosecutor's right. This does change everything. But then I realized that I needed to change everything about the way that I defended DNA cases. Since that point, I've developed a strategy and a plan for defending DNA cases, and I'm here today to share with you what I have learned in hopes that you will change the way you approach DNA cases as well.